We're going to need everyone. And as this country's demographics continue to change and we don't have any familiarity with the people that are increasing in number, we don't do something different, it's going to make the industry even more homogenous and not diverse.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Solar for All, the podcast focused at the intersection of race, class, justice, and equity, and the world of solar and renewables. I'm your host, Jeff Greenfield, and a reminder that all the show notes and other great resources can be found at our website, and that is solarforall.show, and that's SHOW. With me today is our guest, Jason Carney. Jason has been in the energy business for, 12 or maybe more than that, 15 years or so. I'm talking to him from his office in Nashville, Tennessee. Jason is currently has been doing solar and energy efficiency through his business, Energy Electives, for more than 12 years. He's got a diverse background. He's worked for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. He's worked for the Tennessee Departments of Environment and Conservation. And he's currently the president of the Tennessee Valley Solar Energy, or the Tennessee Solar Energy Association. Jason got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Tennessee State University. He holds his NABCEP, a LEED certification, BPI, PEM, and he has a master's degree in civic leadership from Lipscomb University. And I'm really excited to have him as a guest on our show to hear from his perspective what's going on in solar, what's going on in our industry in terms of reaching out and being more inclusive and leveraging all the talents of everybody in America, and also bringing solar and energy efficiency to communities of color or other overlooked and underserved communities. We'll probably talk about a couple other items along the way as well. And without further ado, welcome to the show, Jason. Let's start with the first chapter of your solar career, or maybe your energy efficiency career. How did you get into this stuff? Why solar? Why not something else?
So my story is interesting. I mean, as you know, I always tell people solar is not like plumbing or HVAC or electricity where there's decades and decades of trade schools and labor unions. This is very much, if you wanted to, even today, but 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to be in it, you had to find your way. You had to kind of pick and prod. So the way I got into solar was my senior year of undergrad. Our capstone was about renewable energy. We looked at the different forms of renewable energy back then, and we chose hydrogen, but we had looked at solar and wind and others. So then when I got into the professional world, in HVAC, there was a design standard that was picking up steam called LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And one of the ways that you could pick up points points in the LEED system was to do some type of alternative energy. So that's when I saw solar again and just got the bug all over again. It was 2009 or so. Barack was the president. He had put out, he was backing the Sunshine Initiative. Our governor of Tennessee was Phil Bredesen. He was trying to set Tennessee up as a solar state, and it seemed like a great time. Of course, the trade wars with China started happening, and a lot of the mom and pops, fled the scene. But by this time, I was already smitten by solar. So I just said, somehow, one way or another, I'm going to continue as I'm working. In my professional career, I'm going to be trying to figure out how to transition over into solar full time at some point.
Yeah, that was an exciting time when the Obama administration saw the potential impact for solar and energy efficiency as a way to boost the economy while also achieving environmental and social goals. We'll see if Build Back Better in one form or another, revives that concept using kind of policy to push this exciting technology. Are you involved in policy? Is that part of your role at the Tennessee Solar Association?
So not exactly. Specifically to your question, the Tennessee Solar Energy Association is the state chapter of ACES, which is the American Solar Energy Society. Each state chapter has its own, I guess, autonomy and how it, wants to conduct itself. And I'm in the Tennessee Valley, which is controlled by the monopoly utility called the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA. So my vision for TSEA has been not to be adversarial or combative, with the monopoly, but to just promote solar as much as possible. So we talk about education and celebration as our mission, just to continue to look for great stories of solar in Tennessee and promote them as much as possible, such that people ask more questions and lead them to what we all know in the industry, which is it's a real battle with our utilities, but to kind of lead them there organically through their interest versus trying to lead them through kind of contention. That being said, I got to TSEA through policy work. So I was kind of transitioning, thinking that I was going to put 2 feet into solar. As I said before, my whole plan was to kind of slowly transition over into solar. But as they say, man makes plans and God laughs. So, so I found myself in transition and thinking I'm going to. All right, it's time to put both feet in solar, and then on a whim, which is a somewhat of an interesting and long story in itself. But on a whim, I met the executive director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. He, saw the paper that I produced, my thesis in grad school, and said, "Hey, you're thinking the same things we're thinking. How, we know solar is in its kind of infancy stages, and with all that's going on, how about just let's work together? Why don't you work with me, and hopefully maybe we can make some headway, so that such that by the time you decide to transition out, there'll be a much better market for you." So I thought that was a great idea and made sense to me. So I accepted the job with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and that's where I really learned a lot about policy and the levers of power and who, how the sausage is made and all those great things. I had a great learning experience at the Southern Alliance around energy policy in the state, the region, and kind of nationally. So as I was working there and the resources for the state, I didn't really want to move anywhere, were kind of drying up. He asked if I wanted to, he had people that were running TSEA, but somewhat old and having some health issues. And they came to him and asked, "Hey, do you have anyone that might want to lead this organization for us?" So he asked me, I said, yes. And so that's how I got to TSEA through my policy work, but I don't really, and even today, I still have great relationships with SACE, and I still try to assist them with policy work. I'm now on the mayor's sustainability council, so I'm really, so deep into policy work now that I can't ever say I'm not in policy work, but I don't focus on it as much as I try to go out there and build systems and weatherize homes.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a balancing act. I think if the world depended on policy to get things done, we wouldn't ever get anything done. I think you, like me, I love actually getting stuff done and looking at a project that we've built and saying, "Wow, that's another home or another building that's harnessing the power of the sun," and also educating everybody. All the kids that go to a school that's got solar on the roof are, not only learning about writing and arithmetic, but they're also, seeing firsthand that solar works and that a portion of their electricity is being made by the sun. And hopefully some of those kids are going to grow up and be, who knows, senators and
I'm that kid.
yeah. Well, tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's broader than that, but it's so funny that all these years later, um, my grandmother brings me the program to a play that I did in the, I think it was the 6th grade. My teacher made me the lead, and this was the day before my youngest brother was born, so it's May 24th, 1990. Made me the lead in a play called In Search of a New Planet. And so, all the way back then, the plot of the story was we had trashed this planet, and that we had to go to other planets to see if they would allow us to live there. And so I went and talked to the people of Tridonia and talked to the people of another planet to see if they will let us come and stay there. So it was just my grandmother showed me that, and I was like, wow, like apparently the seed was planted back then that we've got to do better about this planet.
Oh man, that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
Tridonia. I'm not going to ask how the play ended, but obviously a seed was planted. You probably do meet a lot of young people, and I think it seems like the interest in the environment and climate change kind of goes up and down. And I've met people, some students, college students, and even high school students that, to be honest, they're a little depressed about this. They're a little bit frustrated. And it's sad to see young people, which I think are our future, not having as much hope for the future as I would wish that we would give them. Well, what's your perspective on that? Do you get to interact with younger folks, or do you get to listen to people in your community?
Yeah, yeah. Wish I could do a lot more of it, and I probably do, more than most. But part of the story that's kind of got me here is that in grad school, I started to kind of build an idea of what I wanted to build as a business or as a kind of as a life mission, which would include both kind of a charitable arm as well as a for-profit arm. And started as this grand idea to bring community solar to Nashville. It became educate local community as phase one. We'll get to community solar at some point. So we came up with the idea that we'll use a local high school to put some actual real tangible furniture in the community that people can come up to, touch, feel. You can talk about solar panels and inverters and wiring and racking and mid clamps all day long, but I always tell people if when I used to listen to my granddad, other mechanics talking about go get me the 3/8 socket wrench, and I'm like, okay, I'll go over there to that toolbox, but I don't even know what a socket wrench is. So I think it's important that there's a physical picture in your brain of something so that you can more easily understand it and make progress around it. So, you can talk about these things, but if someone has no clue what a panel is, it's hard to really, really touch them, really make real progress. So, to actually have physically put panels, inverters, and things you can go and touch and talk about in the community was the goal in grad school, and that's what we did. And national NPR picked the story up from a blog that I did about it with SACE, and it's really helped put out my story and also bring some attention to this idea that young people really can do it. The whole idea of my project was that this isn't rocket science, right? You need tons of money to get in the energy space in fossil fuels, but with solar panels, if you just educate yourself on how it works and keep safety first, you can put 3 or 4 panels together and get you a little bit of power to do some things, right? And then you can just build from there. So the whole idea was the students would lead this, and they did. They picked the spot in the school. They set the design. I was there as a project advisor just to kind of say, okay, you can't do that. That's not possible. And everything that and here's why you want to do this. Here, you want 180 degrees from the sun. We're at about 36 degrees latitude, and why that's important, and all those things. We taught after school and sometimes during class, and then we did our best to let them lead the project, and anything that needed professional license to do, we allowed them to pick the contractors and all these things. They went down to the codes office, got codes approvals and things like. So that took several years, and there was a lot of course, challenges in between. But thank God we got it done, and now that's there for them. So, and even now, I've got some college students that have asked me to be their project advisor for their senior capstone, and I'm having them look at a lot of policy things in the Tennessee Valley. So, yeah, I'm always. It's almost like the policy thing. Like I'm too deep into the students to ever be fully out of. I'm always, that's where my heart is. That's what I'm always angling for. I'm also involved with kind of the local Sunrise movement, which is a young people's movement around sustainability and climate change. So yeah, I do see the. I really hate to use negative thoughts around this. I see the passion that they have and them understanding the gauntlet that is in front of them. I like the energy, and I do also see where they have to take breaks, which in policy work you have to take breaks. You'll burn out because it's such a long game, and it just doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes you have to wait for someone to leave their seat of power and a new person to get in before something changes, and that's not going to happen until the next election cycle. And you got to build momentum to get the right person in there, and it's so much stuff that and you've got to always be pushing as hard as you can, and you got to take breaks. So it's a marathon, and I see where they start to understand the energy it's going to take, which they have because they're young, and then they have to take breaks, but they come back to it. They don't leave it. So I guess that's what I think I would end with, is that yes, there is some need for breaks, and you can see where they start to see, man, this is hard, but I never see them say I quit. They never say that, this is, I'm done with this. So I'm encouraged by that.
Oh man, Jason, I'm getting chills here. It's I, it makes me think I definitely need to reach out and get some younger folks from the Sunshine Music movement as guests, and listen to them and get their perspective in this. Um, I'm glad that your experience with this educational project probably touched a lot of lives. Folks, if you want to learn more, we'll have links in the show notes to both the NPR story, as well as the blog post that it was based on. I think the title was "Bringing Solar to Communities of Color," and uh, sounds like a journey for sure, a multi-year project where you touched a lot of lives and probably had a lot of uphill work to make that happen. Um, tell me more about that mission to bring solar to communities of color. I think earlier when we were getting ready for the show, you talked about how solar, is pretty popular with the affluent or the fanatic, and I love that term because that really does talk about the early customers for your business and my business. Because the prices are coming down now and things are getting better, but it's still not an easily accessible technology. And there's a lot of folks that are, not ready to write those big checks or don't have the credit to sign up for those loans. What kind of, roadmap could you paint if you were in charge, if you had the ability to make better policy? How might you paint a picture of the future so that solar could be more universally accessible?
That's there's a lot there. So I guess I'll give you probably maybe two or three things that are big things. You said I get to determine it, so as much as uh, your policy listeners, your people who are in it will be like, yeah, that'll never happen. You gave me the power, so I'm just gonna go with what I think would be great. One would be, which is kind of the low hanging fruit, is net metering. Net metering is under attack all over the country. I have to now have the conversation with customers about storage, which adds, cost to the initial investment. And so, that's something that would take away that, 10 to 15 to $20,000 addition to your solar investment. With the prices falling, it's now coming into view for more people. But since net metering is under attack, now it's back, right back up there to the affluent and the fanatic again, right? And that's the way they want it. So yeah, if the easiest one would be make net metering a federal policy, and when we say net metering, we're talking about at the very least, whatever you charge for retail is what you pay for um, the electrons that we're putting back on the grid. So that's number one. Number two would be let's. I'm gonna try to be practical. The less practical would be remove all subsidies from fossil fuels and give all those subsidies to solar. That would be the silver bullet. But let's say we go with a gradual phasing out of uh, of subsidies to the oil and gas industry, either just a phase out completely or just a balancing of. So this year they get 80% of the subsidies. We solar people get 20%, and then in 5 years it's to 40%, and within you know 10 years it's 50-50. All those subsidies they're getting, we get 50% of them. So now it's an even playing field. Even with their subsidies, solar is still, as far as levelized cost of electricity, it still competes, if not beats. I think it's already passed. It still beats fossil fuels. So we know it's better in all areas for the environment, it's cost wise, health wise, job wise, it's superior, but we don't get to see that because oil and gas is subsidized so much, and the conversation is so skewed that we don't want to give subsidies to solar because it's gonna affect poor people. The people who can't afford it, they're paying for it through these subsidies and incentives. And no one is talking about the fact that oil and gas has been subsidized for years and decades. So, you know, those are the two big things that I think if I had the power would probably I'd work very hard to get those two things so that we have a more even shot at this thing.
Amen. Amen. So kind of like those are universal. Those are going to make solar better for, somebody in Austin, Texas, and somebody in Nashville,
Hmm.
Tennessee, or somebody in some small town outside of Nashville. How about the job creation? And how about trying to broaden this as a career path? Because we've got folks that don't know what they're going to do after high school or might not even stay in high school. They they're just not sure what the future holds for them. And on the other hand, you and I know it is so hard to find the great talent that we need either up on the roof or behind a computer designing something, and we're just at the beginning of a big boom. So how do we connect those dots?
Again, I'm going to take this from the place that I've got the power to do something, right? So, gosh, there's so many directions you could go in with this, but the thing for me, from my perspective, is, and part of the reason why I do this is to give some diversity to the industry itself. So, energy electives, one of our mottos is that we stand at the intersection of diversity and clean energy. And so, right now, the industry is, very white, very male dominated, and these just kind of like you know, coaches in the NFL, right? Like those that are picked by people you're comfortable with. So you don't know. You went to a private school in some suburban area, you went to some, you know, PWI as far as a college, you've never had real interaction with people of color. So now that you're in these positions, you don't have any access or familiarity such that you're ready to give real responsibility and access to resources to a person of color. So we need to have something like, let's say, at the city level, let's say, okay, all city buildings are going to um, have solar on them. They're going to be powered by solar, and we're going to make sure that the people that do the work are representative, of what we're trying to do. You could have a business that was at least 51% owned by a person of color, or a business that its overall workforce is at least 51% minority, people of color, women. So if something like that was a policy, I think now you would have businesses that would see an opportunity to expand and open this up. We know that solar creates jobs 4 times that of the national, average as far as the national economy. So we know that the work is there. We know we need it. Solar is, a very small percentage of our energy mix nationally. So as you said, a boom is coming. We're going to need everyone. And as this country's demographics continue to change, and we don't have any familiarity with the people that are increasing in number, then it's gonna, if we don't do something different, it's gonna make the industry even more homogenous and not diverse. So yeah, policy such that it incentivizes. First, we know the work is there, because that's the difficulty. Is I'm going kind of project to project, um, and you kind of have to hire kind of day workers, because you don't know if you've got a year's worth of work or 2 years worth of work. From my perspective, other people, I think the people, as that's my point, the people who do have that kind of security don't look like me, So and then they don't have any incentive to try to make their workforce look like me. So we've got to have the work there that's kind of guaranteed, that it's going to be there, and then you've got to incentivize owners, entrepreneurs like myself, or owners that don't look like me to get the work, that they've got to diversify the workforce.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to provide that stability, which, again, you're in Tennessee, which is one of the toughest states in the nation
Correct.
for residential solar because of their anti-solar net metering policies. Um, but on top of that, some kind of increased demand with a focus to, in your words, and I like them, make the workforce reflect the demographics, make the workforce look like the population, especially with units of government who are out there to serve the population.
Yes, and especially the executive level, the C-suite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've had some guests earlier on the show talk about that. As it's not just let's get some more Latinos, carrying heavy things in the hot sun, but there's folks that are good talents in engineering. They can be doing the CAD layouts, they can be doing the sales, they can be doing the accounting and the clerk work, and there's so many different roles in this ecosystem. And to your point, it does not look like our country's demographics right now. It looks more like me than like you, and more like the of us men than like the 51% of the population that's female. So besides recruiting and trying to reach out and say, hey, there's a career in solar here, might be a good fit for you, and trying to get somebody on board, what advice would you have for folks that are doing that recruiting, but they also realize that once they get somebody to join the team, how do you keep them on the team? How do you make sure that you have a welcoming work environment? I mean, that's something that I think a lot of organizations that are well intended, they still struggle with.
We could figure that out, we probably solve the world's problems. So I don't pretend to say that this is the exact silver bullet, but you're going to have to actually want it, right? If you don't want it and you're just doing it to check a box so that you can get a contract, then I understand that, because you got to do something for your business. I get that, but just also be clear that it is highly unlikely you're going to retain. If you do go and do this, that you're going to retain it, because your heart's not there. You're not going to create an environment for this person or these candidates to survive long term in. You're just not. And all of us at some point get to a point where we say, poor and happy is better than rich and miserable. And we say, well, I'm not happy here. No one, I don't have any respect here. No one else looks like me, don't understand my perspective. And then they just, start to slowly find another thing or transition away. So that's kind of the first thing. Realize that if you're just doing it to get a contract, it's probably not gonna work out. Could work out for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but you know, you didn't, you don't even know that person. You just checked a box. All right, so that's that part. The other part I would say is to help with that. Understand why it's needed. Okay, understand why it's needed. Try to have some compassion for the fact that we need diversity and why, and bring in a DEI person or someone to come and talk to you about this. There's lawyers that can explain all the way from Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus the Board of Education, all the way up, to today, to explain kind of why we are where we are, and why this stuff is needed, right? So why, affirmative action is not an ugly political football to throw around, but it's, something that was needed because of something. So dig into the why, and then you can go out and hire someone with an understanding of why, and then try to retain that person. So then partner with a firm like myself. Find a minority firm that wants to, go in the same direction, and they are out there. I'll throw one out that I'm a part of, which is called BOSS. It's Black Owners of Solar Services. Find one, and then, try to find, a rhythm, a cadence, an understanding of that business's reasons for existence and what they're trying to do, so that if you do bring on someone, you can point to this partnership. So that partnership can be also used as some type of liaison, or some way of making that person that you brought into your company feel like, hey, we partner with women-owned business or veteran-owned business, or other minority businesses. We partner with them, and if you ever want to, you know, shadow, if you ever just, have that business understand, we're bringing these people on, and we want you to also be somewhat of a resource for them, because a lot of times people get in these environments and they don't see anybody that looks like them, and so they just don't feel comfortable. They don't feel like they can have those conversations that need to be had. They don't feel mentored, and that's a big thing. You're fresh out of school. You have no idea how the corporate environment works, how to navigate it. You're just trying to learn the X's and O's, of the business, and you're missing the probably more important soft skills that you need, social skills that you need, different culture that you're walking into, especially if you're like me coming out of an HBCU. That's it's a whole different culture going into a dominant white environment. So, yeah, partnering with a black business, or a woman-owned business, or some other business that you have an understanding with them. Hey, as we bring people on, we would like you to also kind of be there to talk with them if they need you as a resource, that they can reach out to you in places, in ways that we can't. We know we're limited in, uh, you know, why can't you put raisins in your potato salad, right? Well, the black-owned business knows that. They know why. You may not know why. You may think it's totally fine, but it's those things that, those nuances that can help someone stay.
Wow, man, thank you so much for all that
Mhm.
perspective and your thoughts on that. The through line that I heard there kept coming back to
Yeah.
authenticity. And unfortunately, there are folks that are probably checking a box. And if you've got a policy that's not necessarily well designed, it might lead to more checking boxes and jumping through hoops without that genuine desire to learn and grow and change. Um, but on the other hand, the guests that I'm talking to, and a lot of people in the industry and beyond solar and beyond energy efficiency, I'm hopeful that a lot of people are waking up to the part of our culture that really needs to change, that they might have been blind to. I think a lot of folks uh, have grown up for the most of their lives blind to this stuff. Uh, you mentioned that you went to an HBC, HBU, and then you mentioned PWI. Is that a acronym? Is that primarily
I
white
think
institution? I don't think I'm familiar with PWI.
the P, yeah, I think the P is predominantly, yes. Yeah, so that's like common lingo, in academia, HBCU, PWI,
Yeah, so I'm sure I went to a PWI and I didn't even notice it when I was there. I think a lot of folks, they're not bad or good. It's just the way that
Yes,
the
it.
dice rolled. That they're born
Yep,
in a certain spot, they grew up a certain way, they went through a certain
yep,
educational path, they had doors open for them and rose up through the ranks, and now they've got a certain amount of power and influence, and they could do something with that if they kind of desire to make that change.
Yeah, they've worked hard, and I get it. So there's some reservation, if not reticence, to the whole idea of DEI, and but again, everyone's different. You may have a sentimental thought behind it, and or you may have an economic behind it. And I think that in either way, there is a reason to diversify, and I think all of the studies show that diverse institutions are able to cover more ground and it increases the pie. Right, your organization. I'm not a I don't have those numbers readily available, but I've heard this more for many years that the research shows that when you diversify, it is better for your organization overall.
It's certainly better for a jungle or a forest to have, a diverse bunch of species in there versus a monocrop that gets taken out by one disease. And I think the same holds true for people and cultures and organizations that we are a melting pot here in North America, and I think that's one of the reasons we've been so successful. I hope that again, we are so much room to grow and so much room to do better. I think you've called out some specifics that we could do better on the policy side as well as just in the private sector, just making choices. We talk a lot about the economy and talk a lot about supply and demand of workers and employees, and I like to call them the talent pool. And what an incredible inflection point we're at right now, where I think people are facing up to the fact that to be successful in the private sector, they're going to have to make their businesses and organizations more welcoming, more inclusive, smarter about how to do that, um, and partnering with organizations like Boss. We'll have a link to Black owners of solar services in the show notes. Looking forward to getting some representative from that organization as a guest on the show. I think it's again, it might be more talk. It might not really happen, or we could make a major shift in at least in the solar world and be a leader in the private sector for moving towards a more inclusive society. I guess it's all on us. It's on you. It's on me. It's on our listeners. Before we start to wind down and shift to the next section, any points we haven't talked about?
No, no, this has been good. I hope I haven't bored anybody to tears. That's about it.
Well, if they're tuning in, they care about this stuff. So I don't think anyone's going to be bored to tears. And in fact, that's our goal here is to provide diverse perspectives, provide new ideas, and also to connect the dots. Folks might reach out to you or to some of the other resources from our other podcast guests, and hopefully speed things up as we navigate the changing times we're in. And 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 to that effect, we've got the second part of our podcast, the Solar for All Better Together section. So part one is the note and promote, where you can share a book or author that you'd like to call out and amplify and tell our guests why.
So many books, but I guess that if I had to pick one, it would probably be Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. It's a really great book that kind of lays the foundation for why, right? We talked about a business owner not really having a reason or a why he wants or she wants to diversify. And I think that Cast is a good foundation for the why. And it was I've read about civil rights. For me, I'm a civil rights buff in the way that some people are Civil War buffs, right? Like I've read a lot. I really think the people were giants in my eyes, and I think that the '60s was like the seminal time, in American history and North American history, and even for me, Cass was an eye opener to a different the way that she writes. It's so um, it's almost motherly, in explaining something that causes so much tension with people, and explaining how it's a global thing. It's not just America, but there are caste systems all over the world. if we understand that and we are in positions of power where we can affect change and get help people get out of these caste systems per se, then we should. So I'll pick that as the book, but I could give you so many others.
Well, you're the second guest to call out that book. So thank you for that. And I you sound like the kind of a person that has a hard time filtering it down to just one. Um, how about a piece of advice or wisdom that you'd like to pass along to our listeners?
I am I'm also one of the co-ministers at my congregation, Ohio Boulevard Church of Christ. So I mean, goodness, it's like asking me to pick my favorite child. What's the piece of advice or wisdom I'd like to go with the most? Um, I'll go with this one. I don't think I don't know if I've ever said it in a public fashion like this. I've shared it with friends, but I have an uncle who is not with us anymore, and he had, I just as far as intellectually, I really looked up to him. He probably, again, just a giant in my eyes in the way he lived because he seemed free. He seemed not confined to his race or his gender or any of those things. He was just a man, and he was what he was. Right? He's a black man that I'd get in his car and he'd have, Pink Floyd and Leonard Skinner albums. He was, he was a sailor. He was in the Navy, and just, you know, really, really smart man. But like all of us, he had his challenges. As he is leaving his challenge, his one of his challenges, kind of overcoming it and reflecting on it, he says to me, Jason, every answer to life is in this book. And he was pointing to the Bible. And I felt like it was almost like Solomon in Ecclesiastes, where he's just like, look, I've done everything. I've had all the money, I've drank all the wine, I've been with all the women. And at the end of that book, he says, fear God and keep his commandments. That's the whole duty of man. Like I've synthesized everything, and now I'm handing it to you as a a key to life. So that's what it felt like when he was saying, my uncle was saying that to me. I've done it all, man. I've enjoyed this life. I've made all the mistakes. I've had the successes, and I'm telling you, every answer to every question you have is in this book.
Oh, wow. I think everybody needs an uncle like that. Thank you, Jason. And now the fun part here, we talked earlier about this, our 1+1 playlist, the Better Together 1+1 playlist. It's on Spotify and Pandora and Apple and all those other streaming services. And you get to guess two songs and artists.
I, I was thinking about it as we're talking. Wish I'd had more time, but I think I'm going to land on 93 Till Infinity, which is by the Souls of Mischief. They are a underground hip hop collective, or this is a group, part of a collective um, that kind of came out back when I was in my formative years as I was entering high school, and it's so they're probably the essence of what I was. Right? These are these very they were young. They were, and like I said, it came back in 1993. And again, the song is called 93 to Infinity. They're African American guys with these huge vocabularies, and they're not a part of the mainstream. Like they don't want, that album was on a major label, it was on Jive, but after Jive, they completely left the mainstream and just stayed underground all the way up until now. I picked that one because, like I said, it was a huge one for me in my formative years. That whole album, that whole collective of hieroglyphics, and 93. They say this also, and this is I'm 13, 14 years old when this is out, and I'm listening to it, and they say this then that we are 93 million miles away from the sun. So I didn't even know I'd be in solar when I first started listening to this. And it's almost like this, harbinger of things to come, right? That I love this song and I love this group. And their major album is 93 Till Infinity. So yeah, that's song number one, and it kind of tells you where I was and what has kind of shaped me, and just the way that they approached, hip hop and all that. They're more mainstream. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten in, I stayed in hip hop, but I'm more into Christian hip hop now. So it's hard to pick one song, but currently my favorite artist is an artist named Eshawn Burgundy. Nothing but the blood. I'll give yes,
Nothing But the Blood,
yes, nothing but the
Eshawn
blood.
Burgundy.
Eshawn Burgundy, and
All
so
right.
his chorus is the words of an old gospel hymn. For my part in this I see nothing but the blood.
Well, we got two new awesome songs added to our 1+1 Better Together playlist, and we are better together because I never would have heard of either of those bands. I bet if the two of us didn't connect on this podcast. Um, and uh, and tune in, and you'll hear some stuff on that playlist that you would never find out because our guests bring our guests bring stuff from their backgrounds or their perspectives, and it really is amazing. Just like you were saying earlier, that diversity is a strength if we look at it that way and are authentic about it. And I think same thing with our music. It'd be pretty boring if all I was listening to was Leonard Skinner and Pink Floyd, like your uncle. Well, Jason, this has been great. I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and look forward to following your path, and wishing you the best of success.
I really do appreciate it, Geoff. This was fun. Thank you for inviting me.